One of the most frequently asked questions I get is which heroes are good and which heroes are food. So we're going to be making some videos discussing every single faction and each hero in it, and which ones you should be building and which ones you should be discarding. So today let's begin with the Shadow faction. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit that subscribe button because we won't just be doing the Shadow faction, we'll be doing every single faction in the game, including Transcended, because one of the most asked for videos is my opinion on all the Transcendence heroes. So that will be coming at the end of this series. So folks, be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button to catch this. But today, Shadow Heroes. So we need to firstly understand the fundamental difference between 5-star heroes, because not all are built equally. First things first, some heroes go from 4-star to 5-star. As you can see, there are 5-star forms of some weird heroes. Take, for example, we've got Glenn, we have Bone Carver. Every single 4-star hero can be built to 5-star. Some also can be built to 6-star, which is Glenn, Bone Carver, and Deathspawn. So it's worth noting that those three in particular can be upgraded. However, because they have a 4-star form, they cannot be taken to 10-star, which is very important because it means you can only build them as 9-star food. So this series is going to assume that you know that already, and you know that you need 10s and 9-star heroes as food, and you know how to progress. If you don't know about building E5s and those kind of things, we have other videos available on the channel as well. This is to cover the heroes that you know you need to keep for later in the game. That is the point of this series. So when it comes to the heroes that can be made to 10-star, there is also a few key distinctions. There is elite and non-elite, and that determines whether you can or can't get them from elite hero shards, and also the probabilities of pulling them. And then there's also imprintable and non-imprintable, and this requires you actually to have an E5 to know. If you click on someone like Annabelle, you'll see there's this swirly little symbol which tells you that she has imprints. These imprints not only improve the attack, HP, and speed of your hero, but will also give you additional bonuses to your already existent skills. So you'll see that the skills that you would normally have on a 10-star version get upgraded from level 3 to level 4, and this will make them more powerful and more potent, potentially improving this hero for the greater good, and making them from being not very good to exceptionally strong. This is important because heroes that can't be imprinted are immediately not very good in most circumstances. And for the Shadow faction, every hero that can't be imprinted is bad. So let's quickly discount Kameth, Corpse Demon, Bloodblade, Walter, Field, Karma, Aiden, Bade, Lutz, and Dominator. Those heroes are all trash. Every single one of them you can safely use as food. The highest you will want to take them to is 10-star and feed away and never look back at again. Some of them are quite rare, actually. Corpse Demon and Kameth are still elite heroes, so they're hard to get copies of, but it doesn't mean they're good. They are bad. Bloodblade is fun to use in the early game because he has some inbuilt healing and can do things that are beneficial for an early player, but it means you should build him to 10-star, use him for a little bit, and then feed him off, if at all use him, because honestly you guys should probably be building Garuda as your first 10-star because you get given a ton of copies for free. Just follow the glory challenges, it's not difficult. So yeah, don't even consider that. Look at this, every single hero down here, garbage. For the heroes that can be imprinted though, we get Jarrah, Horace, Gusten, Ithaca, Tix, Eloise, Kiramaru, and Annabelle. And we're going to be talking about what makes these heroes good, which ones to build, and how to build them in some cases. So let's begin at the very top of the list. The best shadow hero in the game. The fundamental shadow hero that will basically make or break your progress with this faction. Eloise. Eloise is the most versatile E5 that is non-transcendent in the game. This hero is pretty much the cornerstone of most early and mid-game accounts because she is just that good. Let's go through her skills. First of all, her passives enhance her attack, HP. She gets a whopping 60% block, she's got some control immunity, and she gets some decent speed as well. She has the ability Captive Phantom, which means whenever an enemy is slain, all enemies lose precision, and that's huge because precision is what counters block, so it's a nice way of allowing her to block more, which is fundamental to her later skills. Also, she has a 100% chance to gain a stack of Phantom Shadow, which means the next time when Sacred Soul is inflicted, one stack of Phantom Shadow will be consumed to increase the damage of that Sacred Soul ability by 50%. And that means nothing to you right now because you don't know what Sacred Soul is, but you can go and see it here. Sacred Soul is a skill effect, and at the end of the round, it deals damage equal to 3% of the target's max HP. So it's just fixed damage that hits your opponent at the end of the round. That damage is then increased by that passive ability, which is fantastic. And then she heals as well. So it's a really, really effective ability. As well, when she blocks attacks, she's going to deal damage to 3 random enemies. So the way Eloise works is she gets hit, she attacks back. She gets hit, she attacks back. Because every time she gets hit, you want her to block. So immediately, what you should get from this is that she will need as high a block ability as you can possibly get. Now, fortunately, when you get her to Void 1, you unlocked the higher version of Dancer Blades, which takes your block to 70%. As well, she's a ranger, so if we go to the guild tech, you'll see that for rangers, they get an additional 20% block. 70 plus 20 takes you to 90% block, and then add to that the minstrel's cape, which is the ranger chest piece, you can gain a further 5% block. So already, you can take Eloise to 95% block just for being Void 1, which means you can get away with something like an attack holy damage stone, an attack HP stone, in game modes where enemies don't have a lot of precision. In game modes where they do, such as Seal Land, you might want to consider block attack or block HP, because that's going to increase your block to much higher than 100%, which is then going to allow you to counteract that annoying precision, which is going to decrease your chance of blocking. On top of this, she also gets her active skill, which deals damage to 3 random enemies and reduces their attack by 15% for 2 rounds, and also inflicts Scarred Soul on those enemies as well. So if you combine her Scarred Soul ability, she's dealing damage, she's healing from that as well. She's also got really nice resilience, she can block a lot. She's just a very, very strong hero that hits multiple opponents, dishes out a lot of damage, and stays alive because she has a lot of inbuilt healing. Build her defensively with something like a Golden Crown, and you're on for a win. And this is a really cool thing that budget players, even free-to-play players, can do very easily, because it's not difficult at some point to get your hands on an artifact, whether it's through having 400 relics or through having a mysterious chest. All you need is a single golden crown, which I can show you here in the artifact menu. It's this artifact right here, and in its upgraded form, you will see just a golden crown alone, no additional copies, not upgraded, will give you a further 18% attack, 25% HP, and most importantly, 25% all damage reduction. And that damage reduction means that you can take more hits, you can survive more, which means she's going to be able to heal much more efficiently, she's going to be able to take that heat, she's going to be blocking as well, which adds to her defensiveness, and ultimately it results in a very, very tanky Eloise who can deal with lots of things very, very effectively. So hopefully I've convinced you that Eloise is a really, really good hero, because all of her skills don't rely on other heroes to be good. She can just sit there, your whole team can be dead, and she's just going bonk, no, attack back, bonk, no, attack back, dishing out those Scarred Souls, dishing out that damage from the blocks, and ultimately she performs fantastically in almost every area of the game. One weakness is she doesn't attack back when she's crowd controlled. So just for people that wanted to build Eloise, we're going to cross to the Abyss faction real quick, because I want to draw your attention to Ignis. Ignis gets a final passive here. When she dies, she's going to give an ally next to her 100% control immunity, as well as 100 energy, and fully heals them. The most important thing here, though, is the 100% control immunity, because that's going to allow Eloise to never get CC'd. So if that Ignis dies, even just in a 9-star form, there you go, Eloise just gained control immunity. And now for the remainder of the fight, you don't have to worry about twine, freeze, stun, none of those things, because Eloise just sits there, takes those hits, doesn't get CC'd, and kills your opponent. So that's the best hero with the Shadow faction, Eloise. And now the rest of our decisions and analysis of the Shadow faction will be done on the back of Eloise. And this comes down to another system in the game that a lot of you players might not understand. When you get a hero to Void 4, you unlock an area of the game called the Cloud Island. This is basically a house where you can put in a hero once they're Void 4 and give them tenants to live in their house. So basically they're a landlord giving their house to other people to live in. However, you gain stat bonuses depending on who's in there, but you just can't put any old hero in. It is a very specific list of heroes that can function as tenants. For example, Eloise has this list of tenants here. We have Flora, Ithaca, Kiramaru, Gusten, Jarrah, Sarja, Tix, Mim, Annabelle, Carrie, Amon-Ra, and Freya. These heroes make up for all the heroes allowed to be in Eloise's home. You'll notice there's a lot of shadow heroes here. So this is where we start thinking, which shadow heroes should I build? Well, you should want to build ones that complement Eloise. So with that in mind, we now want to look at heroes that offer good things for your account, but also can help benefit Eloise by being a tenant. And that brings us down to our next category, which is not fundamental shadow heroes, but specialists. Heroes that can do things that are very good and important on your account. First of all, from this category, we have Tix. Tix is really good at clearing the Aspen dungeon to death 100. It's what he's most well known for, and you can do that with a solid artifact. People have even done it with Echo of Death, so there are ways of doing it with this hero. You'll need a few void imprints to make it reliable, but if you get lucky, learn how Aspen dungeon works, you'll be able to do this. One thing you want to make sure is that you have enough crit. You want to get into 60% crit. He gets an additional 40% from Aspen dungeon. To do that, you might need to give him a crit artifact, or you can get away with giving him a crit attack stone and maybe something that doesn't give crit. If you do have enough crit, you can consider an attack holy damage stone to really maximize his damage. So let's take a look at Tix and what makes him good. He has additional HP, crit, control immunity, and speed from his passives. When a round ends, if an enemy has higher attack than Tix, Tix will exchange his attack with the enemy for 1 round. So here's a cool thing Tix does. He swaps attack with opponents. That means you can make a really high attack opponent a low attack opponent by Tix swapping his attack. And this is a really good disruptive ability in boss fights because it stops them dealing a lot of damage to you. His basic attack also targets the enemy with the highest attack and then is going to deal extra damage equal to 600% of that target's attack. And in the meantime, he's going to reduce their attack by 40% for 2 rounds, which is fantastic. That's a huge number. In addition, that becomes 50% once you've got him to Void 2. So he is just ruining opponents by stealing half of their attack straight up, which is just crippling them. Against boss fights, this is really big, and you will see in Broken Spaces, if you're using a Tix to reduce a boss's attacks, it'll eventually get you to a point where you are taking -1 damage, literally hardly any damage at all. It's like, poke, oh, you hit me? Because they don't have any attack stat left. You've just sucked it all off them with a Tix. It's a very effective ability, and that means Tix will be useful from right at the beginning for clearing Aspen Dungeon, being a tenant for Eloise, and then in later game, he is useful for reducing the attack of bosses and increasing your survivability against really hard, challenging modes like Broken Spaces. As well, stealing attack could be quite useful alongside Eloise, because if you remember, she wants to be tanky, she wants to be able to take hits, and that's going to be really helpful for her to stay alive and deal with annoying opponents that have a lot of attack. In addition to this, Tix has a fantastic active skill that not only deals a lot of damage and steals 25% attack from the opponent, he also has a chance to silence and horrify enemies, which is brilliant. It means you can lock them down because what he does depends on the energy the opponent has, and it will go with the ability that's more useful depending on the energy quality. So by silencing opponents, he forces them to just use basic attacks. So if they have full energy, that's really funny because they don't get the active skill, and if they don't have any energy, he's going to horrify them, which means they can only attack if they have an active skill, but because they don't have any energy, you got horrified. So this is a very effective ability, again, for trying to take some heat off your Eloise by stopping opponents from doing things. So it's really fun. And finally, when he dies, he inflicts Revenging Wraith, which will just deal damage to the person that killed him, and then eventually, once that person dies, deal further damage to the whole opposing team. This is a nice passive that means once Tix is dead, he is still doing stuff, and this is very helpful with Eloise in the Seal Land to deal additional damage, and a Tix is very crucial for those waves in Seal Land that are above Seal Land 20. I didn't mention that Eloise actually can solo Seal Land 20 on her own, so that's a really important thing, actually. If you're trying to get Seal Land 20 beaten, Eloise is the key hero for the Shadow faction, but Tix will help you in those further waves. Next, we have, for our specialists, Ithaca. Ithaca is the complete opposite when it comes to boss fights. Tix is stealing attack from them to ensure that they don't kill you. Ithaca is doing the killing. Take a look at this hero. She gains attack, she gains crit damage, she's fast, and she's got some control immunity. Her damage is nuts. When she does an active skill, she will poison the target, dealing damage equal to 50% of the damage dealt for 2 rounds. If she crits, she'll then bleed them, dealing even more damage per the damage she deals for 2 rounds. And then if she kills someone, she puts a ghost possessed mark on them, which then gives her 100% armor break, so she just ignores people's armor, and the ghost possessed allows her to hit other enemies, basically because of all the different abilities she's got. As you can see, ghost possessed says when Ithaca releases an active skill or basic attack, she'll release the same attack on the enemy that's inflicted with ghost possessed. So you basically double hit opponents then with her whopping damage, and it's catastrophically high. Ithaca is the best damage dealer in the game. It is no secret, because she's doing all this damage over time. She's doing all this base damage. Once she's imprinted, those damage numbers go through the roof because of all the crit and the crit damage she gets. It is wild, and she synergizes with other heroes who enhance damage over time. If we go and quickly mention Delasium, for example, in the Abyss faction, who can increase the duration of damage over time, which is nice. So it just stacks and stacks and stacks. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're mainly focusing on heroes in the Shadow faction and what they do. And Ithaca just basically is one of the best damage dealers in the game. And as well, if you cast your mind back, she's also a tenant for Eloise. And this is actually one of Eloise's weaknesses. She's not that good at dealing with boss fights because she's all about slow, dealing damage over time, and just winning in a stall kind of fight. Fortunately, Ithaca is the opposite. She's a glass cannon who hits like an absolute truck. So enemies that just need to be burst with and dealt with and gone, that's what Ithaca does. So you get a really nice complementary core here where Tix is stealing attack, Ithaca is destroying people, and Eloise is just sitting there taking hits and winning you the long game. So a really, really nice trio of heroes there that definitely will help your progress in the Shadow faction. It's worth mentioning that people will eventually move away from Ithaca on their account and maybe want to go with other heroes like Sword Flash when you finally do get to a point where you can build Transcendence heroes. That's not saying Sword Flash is better, it's just probably a more efficient use of your resources. That said, you might struggle to part with Ithaca just because of how good she is at dealing with boss fights, so I imagine a lot of you will probably want to get used to Ithaca, see what she does in the early game for you, and be very impressed with her damage, and maybe just stick with her until you eventually feel comfortable about switching to a different Transcendence hero when you finally get the option from playing the game for a good 9 months. So yeah, Ithaca is going to be on your team for quite some time. The next heroes I want to talk about are heroes that don't quite make it into this specialist category, but still could potentially be good. I would say it's really Annabelle that's the only hero that falls into this. Annabelle is an interesting hero that's the newest Shadow hero to come out, and she has pretty much one of the most disruptive abilities in the game. Basically, she has the chance to deal Magic Puppet spell on opponents, and basically what it does, it replaces someone's attack with an attack that doesn't do any damage and then heals the person they hit. It's really funny. It's basically like, no. You're not going to do your next attack. You're just going to heal me instead. So not only do the people have basically no option but to just benefit your team, it just removes their active skill in the process. And it's very, very funny because heroes like Garuda, who hit really hard with their active skill, just get shut down by this kind of thing. Unfortunately, there are other heroes that deal with this a little bit better, but from the Shadow faction, this is your best option for dealing with annoying heroes like Garuda. Another problem with Annabelle is when we look at the tenant list for Eloise, if you go back, you'll see that she shares a slot with Tix. And sometimes it's difficult to justify whether you'll go with Tix or Annabelle. You'll see you can't use both of them. You have to choose either Tix or Annabelle when you're using an Eloise. So normally I'd argue you should build one or the other if you want to be efficient, and only really start building Annabelle if you really want to get deeper into Seal Land and use the benefits that she offers to your team. Fortunately, though, Annabelle also does her ability when she dies. You'll see here when Annabelle dies, she inflicts to the enemy who killed her reinforcement spell. It's pretty much very similar to the previous ability. She's going to deal 1% of attack damage to 3 enemies with the lowest HP and then heal them. It's a nice way of shutting down your opponent. Same thing, same ability, but this is when she dies. So you could just build like a 9-star Annabelle. She'll die and then she'll inflict this ability to opponents. So she's quite a fun, useful hero, even not upgraded. So I would recommend you keep Annabelle around. I don't think she is food for many accounts. I think she's quite useful, and she can be quite cheesy because 9-star heroes aren't that much of an investment, and considering what value she brings to an account just as a 9-star hero, thanks to this passive, it's quite funny. I think you can do it with 5-star forms as well if you want to be really annoying, because you can scroll down and look at a 5-star form. It has a very, very similar ability. It just means it heals less. So if you don't care about the healing, you can do exactly the same thing, but with 5-star Annabelles, and all you have to do is level them up to level 80 to unlock this ability. So go nuts. Lots of people use baby Annabelles. baby Annabelle? That's a thing. But small Annabelles in their 5-star form to disrupt opponents, and it's a very, very efficient thing to do. So you don't necessarily have to build her to get her abilities. That's one reason people choose not to build her, is all the stuff that makes her good is already available in a lower form. And yeah, that's why I would say keep the copies, but maybe don't build her straight away. Next, we have pretty much Tenants. Heroes that only are useful because they're tenants. And the most versatile tenant in the Shadow faction, someone you're going to want to put in these homes to benefit the hero that's actually the homeowner, is Kiramaru. Kiramaru is a really weird hero. I'm not even going to go over his skills because he's crap. He's really bad. He's not a very good hero at all. But what he does offer is a very, very versatile tenant slot. Because if you go and look, some of the best heroes in the game use on Kiramaru as a tenant. We'll start with Eloise herself. He is in tenant spot 1. So if you find that you're finished with Ithaca, you can swap the Ithaca to an Kiramaru and he'll still be in that same tenant spot. Go ahead and look at Sword Flash. Sword Flash uses Kiramaru in slot 3. Look at that. The only other hero there is a Nosuke, so that's interesting. So you can use Kiramaru as a tenant for Eloise, and then when you decide to move your team towards Sword Flash, you can use Kiramaru as a tenant for her, which means that's efficient use of building your heroes. On top of this, you'll also see that Aspen, the Lord of Fear, the transcended version of Aspen, also uses Kiramaru in tenant spot 3, so if you wanted to build him at some point, you can use him there too. So the versatility of using an Kiramaru on your team just as a tenant is very, very beneficial. There are 3 really good heroes that use him, and they're 3 heroes that you may at some point want to consider as key players in your account over the years that you choose to play this game. Really though, because he's versatile across Eloise and Sword Flash, that's what makes him a very attractive hero to eventually build on your account. And the other key tenant here is Gusten. Gusten is really a very anti-meta hero that can be quite disruptive and annoying, but just because he's annoying and sometimes can clutch a win, he's exceptionally inconsistent and probably won't do that. So I'm just going to say, do not build Gusten. He's not very good. You may want to save 9 copies to build him to E5 so that you can build him as a tenant for Eloise if you did finally want to fill in the awkward house of Eloise where no one good is there. It's Gusten, Sarja, and Jarrah. Gusten is probably the best pick to go in there. So I would say, yeah, that's an option. If you wanted to, you can build Gusten. He can help you in the Shadow Seal land with his disruptive abilities. I'm not going to go over them. They're not that fantastic, but he basically has an ability to remove debuffs from your team. He can remove buffs from opponents, and he has a ability where he marks a particular enemy and deals damage to them every time he takes damage, which can be quite potent, but you need to keep him alive, you need to heal, he needs to get an active skill off. There's a lot of things that are all high rolly. As well, it's a random hero, so you don't necessarily know who's going to get that random mark that deals damage. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong with a Gusten, which is why he's not necessarily a good hero to build. But he's a solid tenant and a priest, so that's nice, because priest armor gives a good amount of attack, so that's nice, at least. But really, that's it when it comes to heroes that are useful tenants. I did mention Jarrah here, that she's also in that same tenant slot, so there is an option to go and build her too. And actually, whilst we're on the topic of Jarrah, a lot of you might think, hang on a second, Jarrah? I've heard that name before. You probably have, but in the context of Starwing Jarrah, which is a transcendent hero. To make a transcendent hero, you have to go to the Gate of the Void, into the Evolution Cube, and you can turn otherwise not very good heroes into very powerful ones. And Jarrah becomes Starwing Jarrah. And that is why you'll have heard the name Jarrah before. Now, that means you should probably keep around 9 copies of Jarrah so that you can build an E5 Starwing Jarrah at some point, because you still need the copies of the lower form to go and build her. Does this mean you should build a normal Jarrah? Maybe for that tenant spot on an Eloise, but realistically, you just want to save up those copies for the time that you eventually decide to build a Starwing Jarrah as a Transcendence hero. I'll be talking about Transcendence heroes in a future video. And the final hero that's in principle that I haven't mentioned is probably the most outdated shadow hero in the game. It's Horace. Horace was, for a long time, one of the best heroes in the game, although since many years have passed, he's dropped off. He's basically a worse version of Eloise. His build, similar to Eloise, relies on block. He has a counterattack, and after a number of times that he blocks, he will remove a CC effect on him. But because heroes like Ignis exist, you don't really have to worry about that, because Ignis gives you control immunity anyway, and honestly, his damage and healing does not compare to what Eloise is capable of. So unfortunately, Horace is nothing but a B-Tech Eloise, a worse version of what she is capable of. And that means Horace, unfortunately, doesn't get much limelight, and you definitely shouldn't be building him at the moment, because he just isn't a very good hero. And it's sad, because he used to be really, really fun, and I know a lot of people with older accounts will have fond memories of using Horace. But since the release of Eloise, she is now the cornerstone of heroes in the Shadow faction, and the most important for making progress in the Seal Land and across the entire game. Hopefully you've learned something about Shadow Heroes, hopefully you now feel comfortable about who is food, and hopefully you now know which Shadow Heroes to build as tenants, how tenants work, and also which Shadow Heroes are going to help progress your account. Quick refresher for those of you that have made it to the end of the video, Eloise is pretty much the best Shadow Hero in the game. We have Tix, who's able to do Aspen Dungeon and steal attack from opponents, increasing your win rate there, and also adding nice CC effects like Silence and Horrify to improve your win rate with Eloise and things like the Realms Gate, and his passive ability to deal damage can be very useful for cleaning up opponents where Eloise is staying alive. We have heroes like Ithaca who deal a ton of damage against opponents but is very weak, and that's why you want to use her against boss fights to deal a lot of damage, and hopefully there's ways you can keep her alive. She complements Eloise nicely because Eloise doesn't deal a lot of damage quickly, she deals significant damage over a long period of time. So dealing quick burst damage with Ithaca is a nice contrast to otherwise slower heroes like Eloise. And everybody else is more of a tenant or a utility hero or someone just not worth building at all. I will add to this, heroes like Tix and Ithaca, you only need 1 copy of, so once you have 9 copies, you can freely use the remaining ones as food. And that's also true for probably on Kiramaru and Gusten as well, and Jarrah, because you're just not going to be building these heroes. They have a use of building 1 and never really building any more. The days of using multiple Tixes are long gone, and that should remain in the past back in 2020. If you found this video useful, let me know in the comments section down below, and if you have any further questions about the Shadow faction, please do drop it down below. Those of you that are new to the game, welcome, and hopefully you found this insightful. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more crash courses on the different factions in the game, and hopefully you'll learn something about how you can make progress in this game using the different factions to your advantage. I'll see you folks in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, and of course, happy idling.